Okay, what we're going to be doing today is looking at the next stage, which is actually doing something practical, which is great stuff. There's lots of little rumours and theories and processes involved in caricaturizing, but the thing is, what you need to do at the end of the day is just look at the person you're going to be caricaturizing and see what characteristics their face has that would make a nice caricature element. Saying that, there are little rules that you can abide by which are going to help you a little bit, and I'm going to talk about those today. One of the first ones is the eye-nose ratio, and it basically allows you to define the shape of the head, etc, etc. So what I'm going to do is just show you quickly. For instance, if you're drawing a normal face, a normal human face, this is how I basically do it. You have the eye line around about 1/2 down from a circle, then you have your jawline coming in like so. Now from your jawline, if you cut it in half, that's basically where your nose comes to, which is basically a triangle like so. Your eyes fit on this, which is basically halfway through the either half section of the circle. Okay, and you can carry on doing all this mathematical evaluation. So you basically have your mouth appearing there, and you have your so forth. Okay, and your ears will come out like that, like a C shape. This is how you build up your mathematical shape of a face. Now obviously caricatures don't work like this because you have to distort them. Okay, now there's lots of different ways you can distort a caricature's face. I won't go into all of them at this moment because we're going to be talking about faces later on, but you've got several different kind of shapes. You've got the long shape, which could have a little bit of dinch in there, and you can either have his ears down here, or you could have his ears up here, depending on where the eyes are going to be. Okay, if the eyes are down there and he's got a big forehead, for instance, your ears will be relative to that. If they're up here, they'll be relative to that. You can make them even bigger. Okay, so that's one shape you could have. Another basic shape you can have is this kind of diamond chin shape, which is like that. So basically your eyes will be at the top on this one, so they'll be there. Okay, and then obviously you can put your ears here. That's one other shape. Right. Another shape you can have is the opposite, which means you have, it's kind of like a pizza shape, I assume. Now that can mean your eyes are anywhere, but it typically works best if they're in the middle. Okay. Again, you can have your ears there, or you can even have them bigger if you wanted to. So that's a diamond shape. And then there's this, I don't know what you call it, a pear shape, I suppose. So you have an enormous, it's like Stan Oliver Hardy. Okay, so then you fill that section in. You have the eyes up here. Okay, and his mouth will be kind of here, and you'd have a kind of a chin. So this will be enormous mouth area, and obviously you can then have his ears attached like that. So there's several different ways of actually drawing a face. Each one will then define how you do your nose. Now for instance, if you were doing your long head and you had the eyes roughly here, you could have the nose coming down quite low, so that triangle will be there, for instance. Saying that, that's where the ratio starts coming in. That's just one example. So there's kind of a principle. If you're doing a big fat face like this, the eyes are there, you don't want the nose down here, it's got to be up here. And you don't want the eyes then close together because it looks a little bit strange. So what you do is you basically pull the eyes out, and this is where the ratio comes in. So I'm going to show you the ratio. Okay, now let's say we're going to do a normal face, normal eyes. Okay, I'm just going to draw you some eyes quickly. So, I'm not going to spend time drawing a second one because all we need to do literally is to repeat this. Okay, so I'm just going to copy paste, flip it, put it on the horizontal so it's exactly in the right place, like so. And then we're going to draw, to make everything easy for me, I'm going to put more on different layers so we don't mess around too much with copy and pasting. So this is how you would draw your nose next. on a normal face. You'd have this kind of cut through underneath there as well. And so that's a typical face. Okay. Now what you need to do is try to avoid, obviously, that in doing a caricature. You've got to extremely proportionalize those. Now, as I said, if you wanted to do a long face, what you basically need to do is to take your nose and pull it down, like so. Okay. What this does is, and this is where the theory works, is if you pull it down, you then need to pull the eyes together, because it's like it's creating this abstract T shape, but the T can only work in certain forms. So for instance, there's the normal T, oops, there's the wide T, and then there's this thin T. So these are the three basic shapes you need to look for when you're doing your eye combination. It doesn't always work that way. What you need to do is just, as I said, look at your caricature form as much as you can and see how it works. See if it looks like the person once you've done the sketch and everything. Again, there's changes in this as well that's going to happen, which I'll talk about in a minute. Okay, but the next option, if you're actually going to do a shorter person, is to move the eyes further apart and then bring the nose like so, and that's where you start seeing that fatter T. Okay, and this will all work out and it'll all look right when you actually start building the actual person up. But there are variations, so for instance, if this is the normal one, you don't have to literally do that, but you could even do it more, you could do it less. Okay, so it's the kind of ratio between the distance between the two eyes and what visually looks okay in the actual photograph you're using as reference. Okay, now as I said, lots of different things can affect this. I've done this on two normal eyes and one normal nose. Now one thing you could do is, for instance, is to make the nose bigger, like so, because it may be a big nose. Okay, now that could mean that this ratio comes down slightly. Okay, because it can then proportionally make the eyes look more like that fat T. Okay, or you could make it even smaller than you had it, so it becomes a little. Women tend to have lots of really small noses, and they tend to be on a really long stem sort of thing. So you could do a little small nose, and because women have big eyes, you have to then resize the eyes and bring them slightly together, like so. Okay, so that's another way you could do it. Alright, so what I'm going to do is show you some examples of cartoons I've done, or caricatures I've done, and explain why I think they actually work better in the format that they've done, sort of thing. Okay, so we'll just move on to that. Okay, so here we have 4 of my caricatures I've done. I've used them as kind of examples of how noses and eyes work in proportion and everything. I will talk about some of the other aspects, the details, later on, such as eyebrows and all this kind of thing, but it's important to understand how the eyes are basically the very important part of it. If you get the eyes right, everything else seems to fall into place, because eyes contain the kind of soul of the body, they say. So people look directly at the eyes first, so if you make these look okay, everything else can fall into place. But as I said, with Vincent Price here, you'll notice that he's got this, let's see if we can do it with white, this square face, okay, which is long, so it kind of indicates that the actual nose should be long as well. So even though these eyes look like they're kind of standard shaped eyes that would be on a normal body person, the nose gives the indication that you've got that small T that I said. Okay, this is what I'm saying to you. You don't necessarily have to force this onto the shape, but the actual shape of the head can actually define how the actual nose and eyes work as well. But if it's a long head like this, you just basically possibly need to use an extended nose, and you'll also notice the size of his nose here also helps, because if it was like this shape it would be relatively normal. Because he's got a big bulbous part at the end of his nose, that extends it even more, and it gives you that kind of feeling that the eyes are closer together. Plus the width of his head does that as well. Okay. Another one I did. This is Peter Dinklage from Game of Thrones, obviously. Now, because he's got a round face, yeah, the eye line needs to be around about there. He's basically a short person anyway, but you'll notice that then this T shape we were talking about creates this fat T, which means his nose is made a little bit bigger, wider, and so it's also been brought up almost to the same level as the eyes. Okay, I'll talk about shapes of eyes later, but we're just talking about the ratio at the moment. But this is a good example of how I've made his eyes look a little bit more what you possibly would say puppy dog eyes, and it actually gives a kind of a little bit more caricature because the angle is helping. Instead of being flat like that, they're actually angled like that, and it gives a kind of a more characteristic look of the person. So this is a short nose like we talked about, this is the long nose like we talked about, and this is how it works on, say, a female face. Again, you'll notice that this time the eyes have been distorted to look that way. They're a little bit bigger than normal because they're female, but also because of the shape of the head, which is like that, the nose has been extended as well. So you've got again a long T. So in caricature design, it's basically going to be one of the two, fat or thin nose. Okay, here, because the eyes have been enlarged quite a lot, the nose is actually normal, but it's got a small end to it, so that way it does look like a fat T, even though it's the nose is actually normal. It's not like Peter's nose, which has actually been pushed up literally. This is actually being kept normal, but I've extended the size of the eyes to give that kind of temptress kind of female look and cuteness though in the eyes, and it's actually made it look like the nose is smaller. And this also helps because the shape of the head is almost block shape as well. Okay, so this is how you manipulate all these eyes. But going again back to the original drawing ideas that we were doing, what I need to do is just make a new layer. Let's just okay, so what we need to talk about as well is the actual nose shapes, for instance. Now, as I said, when you draw a normal nose, we're talking maybe maximum that kind of look. Okay, that's kind of a normal nose, and it goes to the bridge part of the eyes. Okay, now what you can do is to make the width of the top part bigger, which means this part of the nose would then need to have a smaller, right, so this is what we did on Peter, for example. Okay, another aspect is if you wanted to do eyes close together, what you need to do is then have the nose come from a thing, but then extend it to a bigger bulbous bit at the end, I say. Okay, and that means that needs to be enlarged instead of being a normal shape, because if it was just normal, it probably wouldn't work as well. Okay, so you've got to think about this shape as well as the actual shape of the nose. Okay, and finally, like I say, if you're talking about maybe women are very complicated things to do when it comes to caricatures, because they're very vain, especially when you're doing commissions of people, because they complain a lot about the way they look and everything. You need to try to kind of simplify the women's nose so it's just a basic shape, so they're happy with the way they look and everything. Obviously everybody's nose is different as well. You could have pointed down in parts so the nostrils come further up, or they could be the other way around so you see more of the actual nostrils underneath and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so you've got to be careful of how the actual thing, but that all relates to how the actual photograph they're using as reference. What I've been talking about before with this, it's actually to do with ratio and what makes that person look like that person. You can see, for instance, with Peter, that looks like Peter. Okay, and it's because I've looked at the way his features are actually proportionalized on his face, and because we wanted to maybe extend this part, yeah, this part of his head, then this part of his head has to compress, because you've got to do this as well, which is a very characteristic thing. What we're doing is if you had his face as a kind of a normal shape, yeah, and his eyes would normally be there, and his nose would be proportionally down there, and his mouth obviously there. What we've done is taken this middle section and we've squashed it. Yeah, that's all we've done. So instead of his eyebrows being there, they're there. And instead of his nose base being there, it's there. Okay, which gives you more area here and here to play with doing the recognisable parts. Because he's got this big mop of hair, it's not as big as that, but because we've got the space to do it, you can extend it, and it actually makes it more like a caricature. Okay, so this is what you got to look at. That's the basic rules about how to do your eye-nose ratio. What we're going to do then is move on how to do the face construction to make it all fit together next tutorial.